started?
Sure. Yeah, we have Conor Jackson from Liverpool Hope University. As you see, his title is Zombie Satires and Video Games.
So I just want to start off by saying thanks for having me at the fourth The Rise and Zombieism conference. I also want to say thanks to the conference organizers for the work they've done setting up not just this event, but the events in previously as well. So I attended the first The Rise and Zombieism conference. I'm not sure whether you can see my camera might blur it, but I did get the t-shirt. Hopefully you can see that a little bit. And I think it's kind of gone on and off blurry, but like you get the idea. So the first conference that I attended, I was a PhD student at the time. It was a really great experience for me. I met loads of lovely people. I got some useful reading recommendations. And several years later, I ended up transforming my PhD thesis into a book. Let me just get the slides moving. It should be on the next slide now. Oh, there it is. So can everyone see this? Hopefully, yes. So the book is called Zombies, Consumption and Satire in Capcom's Dead Rising, and it was published in 2024 as part of the Routledge Advances in Game Studies collection. I'll be talking about relentless consumption later on, but if you'd like to engage in some of that for yourself, just know that you can save £10 off the book if you order it on the Routledge website. But shameless self-promotion aside, the book would likely not exist in the way that it does if it wasn't for the experiences that I had at the first Theorizing Zombieism conference. So thanks to everyone involved in putting those together and to all the speakers as well. So on to the main talk then. In the presentation, I will be highlighting the intersections between zombies, satire, and video games. And I'll begin with a quick definition of satire before presenting a historical overview of zombies and satire. I'll then examine the usage of zombies in video games, considering their potential as allegorical figures. And finally, I'll discuss Capcom's Dead Rising series as a case study on the satiric potential of zombies in video games. In this series, various zombie outbreaks occur across the United States of America. Much of the material used for this presentation is taken from a chapter in my book called Satire, Zombies, Video Games, though I've also added material from subsequent chapters to stress that satire in zombie media goes beyond the representation of the undead, and it is also apparent in the origins of zombie outbreaks, the actions of survivors, and even the ways in which people can die. I define satire as a targeted attack on a specific group, or a person, or an institution, or a practice that is communicated in an entertaining manner. Satiric attacks might involve denouncing the alleged immorality of the target, although it must be acknowledged that satiric attacks cannot exclusively be envisioned as moralizing tools. Attacks of satire can condemn many discernible flaws and shortcomings that might not be considered immoral, such as ugliness, clumsiness, foolishness, bad taste, and stupidity. Furthermore, the entertaining manner by which satire is expressed refer to the tried and tested techniques of satire, things like wit, humour, parody, exaggeration, caricature, and irony, and any potential for the attacks of satire to trigger societal change is not assumed in this definition. On the contrary, attacks of satire might function less as calls for change and more as figurative safety valves that allow dissatisfaction with an existing state of affairs to dissipate itself harmlessly. I call satire in video games videoludic satire, and this can manifest in a variety of ways. In my book, I introduce an original taxonomy, a videoludic satire that details how video games can communicate satire via their virtual environments, their characters, their audio, the way they frame the passage of time, and the outcomes of players' choices. I refer to some of these avenues of communication in my discussion on Dead Rising a bit later on. Zombie narratives can be read as metaphors that explore a range of socio-political issues and horrifying phenomena, while centralizing the deterioration of human agency as their core concern. As a mutable signifier, the zombie has a rich history that encompasses a trio of overlapping periods, taking in African tribal mythology, its relocation and reanimation in the Caribbean in the African diaspora, and its final shift into mediation in the cinema, and then beyond that into video games. In 1968, George Romero effectively revolutionized the zombie with the release of Night of the Living Dead. Stripping the zombie of its ties to a puppet master, Romero re-established this being as an autonomous, infectious, and cannibalistic monster. Moreover, it was not just the fundamentals of the zombie's existence that Romero altered. Despite the cultural and historical significance of zombie films preceding Romero's, it was his that imbued the undead with overt socio-political commentary. Likewise, Night of the Living Dead marks the inception of the overtly satirical zombie narrative due to its expose of the profound fragmentation of social structures. If Night of the Living Dead is the prototypical satirical zombie film, its sequel, Dawn of the Dead, is the true forerunner of satirical zombie narratives. In fact, to fully comprehend the satire of Dead Rising games, it is necessary to understand the satire of this film. Dawn of the Dead centers on the struggles of Francine, Stephen, Roger, and Peter as they seek refuge in a zombie-infested United States. Eventually, they find their way into a shopping mall, a glaring symbol of American capitalist consumption. Here they settle and attempt to preserve a sense of normality. This proves to be fruitless when the mall, initially considered a fortress and utopia, is proven to be physically and conceptually vulnerable when zombies overtake the structure. Dawn of the Dead satirizes the false security of consumer society, the notion that consumerism can solve any problem. The film's satire is expressed directly when Roger and Stephen die while prioritizing the ownership of material goods over their own safety. Roger dies after he's bitten by a zombie as he tries to retrieve a bag of tools he dropped outside the mall, whereas Stephen dies after he is assaulted by zombies while refusing to abandon the mall after it's raided by a biker gang. In each instance, their transformations strengthen a key component of the film's satire. That zombie hunger is symbolic and satirical of consumer greed. This is also communicated when Stephen suggests that zombies are drawn to the mall by their consumption-oriented residual memories. Since the release of Dawn of the Dead, the zombie as consumer has become a persistent image in American popular culture and beyond. Romero's film has become a tale disseminated, an allegory mutated, an anti-commodity serially recommodified into an ideological trend. Indeed, the cinematic undead have proceeded to assault the living inside malls in the remake of Dawn of the Dead, as well as in Land of the Dead, and in video games like Stubbs the Zombie and Left 4 Dead 2. Furthermore, beyond evoking the consumption of material goods, zombies have been used as satirical stand-ins for consumers of television. In Treehouse of Horror 3, a Halloween special of the long-running animated sitcom The Simpsons, the titular family return to their couch after evading the undead, and with vacant expressions, ironically remark that at least they are not zombies. Several years later, Charlie Brooker's Dead Set would feature zombies staring obsessively at screens, broadcasting live footage from the reality television program Big Brother. Satirical jabs at ravenous food consumption are also found in zombie fiction. The Simpsons draws on zombies and parody consumers in Treehouse of Horror 20, wherein burgers transform Springfield citizens into cannibalistic killers called munchers. Clearly, the zombie consumer has become a recurring image in popular culture, always leaving at least the residue of Dawn's critique of the false security of consumer society. Despite the allegorical depth of zombies in film, zombies in video games are often viewed as devoid of meaning. Attesting to this, early games featuring zombies had rudimentary visuals, narrative backdrops, and gameplay mechanics. Arguably, the first game to feature zombies was Entombed in 1982, in which the player moves their avatar through a maze that constantly rises toward the top of the screen. If the player's avatar is pushed off the screen or touches one of the zombies that occupy the maze, they will die. However, the game's antagonists are only perceivable as zombies due to the brief narrative exposition on the back of boxes for Entombed. Here, it is stated that a team of archaeologists stumbled into the catacombs of the zombies. Although the so-called zombies have as much detail as stick figures and thus leave much to the imagination. Like Entombed, many early video games featuring zombies used basic character models due to technical limitations. Surpassing these games visually, others like Zombies Ate My Neighbors in 1993 depicted the undead with more detail. Functionally, though, there is nothing separating the zombies from the plethora of other creatures featured within these games. Be it zombies, werewolves, vampires, or even giant babies, all are just the bad guys. However, Capcom's Resident Evil in 1996 altered this binary somewhat with narrative information. Most famously, The Keeper's Diary charts the physical and mental deterioration of a man transforming into a zombie over several days. Alongside the game's attribution of zombism to corporate greed, Resident Evil humanized the undead in a way that was unprecedented in video games at the time of its release. In addition, zombies and zombie-like creatures feature prominently in more recent video game series, such as Dead Rising, Left 4 Dead, Dead Island, State of Decay, The Last of Us, Dying Light, and Arizona Sunshine. The most cited reason for the popularity of zombies in video games is their convenience as morally uncompromising cannon fodder. Zombies have been said to serve as perfect enemies that can be killed without incurring guilt in the name of survival. The attention given to the bodily destruction of the undead in video games is not unwarranted, as many video games featuring zombies are incredibly violent. However, this fixation can result in scholars generalizing zombie video games and zombies in video games, claiming that the digital dead are devoid of deeper meaning. Researchers have started to recognize the cultural worth of the videoludic zombie in recent years, though, aligning it more with other popular cultural depictions of the creatures, which can be viewed as vessels upon which one can project any symbolic, metaphorical, or allegorical meaning. It has been said that video game zombies can manifest potential fears and anxieties concerning mortality, infection, and the natural environment itself, alongside modern medical fears like biohazards. Zombie video games have also been identified as sites for interrogating the politics of race and gender. Yet, despite the long-standing relationship between satire and zombies in popular culture, its videoludic manifestations have only been touched upon lightly. As I mentioned earlier, videoludic satire can manifest in a variety of ways, and the Dead Rising series showcases a plethora of its forms. For the purpose of this presentation, I'll briefly touch upon satire that is connected to the zombies themselves and to players' choices. Dead Rising games typically follow similar formats, with their avatars aiming to survive for a set amount of time while seeking the cause of each game's zombie outbreak. If time runs out for game's missions to be completed, depending on the circumstances, the avatar will either fail to discover the source of the game's outbreak, or they or someone close to them will die. In Dead Rising 1, a cutscene occurs wherein the undead bang against the doors of the Willamette Parkview Mall. This cutscene recalls a sequence in Dawn of the Dead, where zombies can be seen pressed up against glass doors and windows, clamoring to get inside the shops in a gross parody of early morning sale shoppers. Likewise, the pre-programmed nature of the undead in Dead Rising 1 expresses the satirical metaphor of zombies as consumers, as they are drawn towards survivors and will try to eat them. This metaphor is maintained throughout this game and its sequels due to their persistent depiction of zombies occupying consumer spaces. A gambling resort called Fortune City in Dead Rising 2, a metropolis in Dead Rising 3, and another mall in Dead Rising 4. Zombies may be numerous in Dead Rising games, but they are not much of an obstacle to gameplay progression. The possibility of players failing story missions due to assaults from the undead are unlikely. Therefore, instances of satire are less likely to be triggered by players losing their battle against the undead than by players who succumb to the draw of consumption-oriented gameplay. A significant portion of gameplay opportunities in Dead Rising games involve discovering and utilizing virtual objects. In fact, the player's decision to waste time engaging in excessive consumption can be explicitly foregrounded in Dead Rising 2's negative narrative trajectories. Here, satire can stem from the player's decision to dress the game's avatar, Chuck Green, in alternative outfits found within the game's many stores. No matter how outlandish these may seem, the clothing items that Chuck is made to wear during gameplay carry over to his depiction in cutscenes. One such example of this can be witnessed in a cutscene that is triggered if the player does not provide Chuck's daughter Katie with a life-saving drug that prevents her from turning into a zombie. In this cutscene, Chuck falls to his knees and punches the ground in frustration upon realizing that his daughter is dead. Here, his attire can appear at odds with the gravity of his emotional outburst. As Hunt observes, the fact that players can witness this scene, having dressed Chuck in a range of absurd clothing, allows an undermining of the pathos of this scene. Similarly, dressing Chuck in comedic outfits throughout the game does much to undermine the wider sense of threat that we might expect a game associated with horror to contain. While Hunt is correct in pointing out that players can subvert the seriousness of story elements by playing dress-up with their avatars in Dead Rising 2, the satirical potential of enabling the player to change their avatar's clothes should also be acknowledged. The fact that the avatar's alternate attire is made visible in this particular cutscene highlights a connection between the attire and Katie's death. Specifically, it draws attention to the player's choice to neglect Katie in favour of sampling the various fashions that Fortune City has to offer. In this instance, the alternate clothes Chuck is made to wear serve as a satirical reminder of the player's fixation with excessive consumption, a reminder that is especially significant given the knowledge that outfits featured in this game are purely cosmetic. There are many more examples of satire in Dead Rising games that target excessive consumption in a broad sense, as well as the player's own consumption-oriented gameplay. It's beyond the scope of this presentation to address all of them, but I hope that I've at least managed to highlight some of the ties between zombies and satire, as well as the ability of zombie video games to prevent satire in a way that is unique to the medium, going beyond the level of representation and into that of simulation, as player action itself can be satirized. So thank you for listening to my talk.